Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome to Declassified Caribbean channel. That's news and commentary. Now, tonight we are discussing, or we're going to discuss a case that has sparked intense debate across the United States, the death of Nolan Wells. Beyond the tragedy itself, the case has become part of a larger conversation about race. And that is something that we're going to be exploring in tonight's conversation. So I hope that you will join very closely and trying to get this off the screen so that we can have less. Yeah, let me get that. Give me a second. Let me get this off the screen. Don't know why this is. All right. Give me a second. Let me get this off the screen. I'm wondering what is here. Okay, good. All right. Thank you so much. But yeah, thank you so much. All right. So beyond the tragedy itself, the case has become part of a larger conversation about race, media coverage, justice, and public perception. Now, we'll begin with the known facts, then examine why this story has generated such a strong national reaction. As always, distinguish verified information from speculation and let me know your thoughts in the chat as we move along. Now, race is a social construct. We've been examining this even in last night's conversation. We were talking about racism and classism in the Caribbean. And today we'll be looking at, or tonight, this evening, we'll be looking at racism in the United States of America. Although this case is unfolding in the United States, the questions it raises about justice, race, media narratives, and public trust have implications far beyond America. That's why I think it's worth examining. It's going to affect everything that is happening there, also spills over into the Caribbean. Now, tonight we're looking at the case that is already sparking national attention and raising uncomfortable questions. A young black man, Nolan Wells, goes out on a boat with a group of white friends off the coast of Mississippi. They head to Horn Island. Everyone makes it back except him. Now, a body has been found. Authorities believe it is Nolan's, is that of Nolan's, but they're not yet 100% certain. And almost immediately, the conversation turns to race. Now, some people will say, wait for the facts, and that's fair. But in a place like Mississippi, history doesn't sit quietly in the background. It shapes how people interpret the present. This is a state where Black people were once enslaved in massive numbers, where lynchings were used as public terror, where Emmett Till was murdered and his killers walked free, where civil rights leaders were assassinated, and where justice for a very long time depended on the color of your skin. So when a black man disappears under unclear circumstances, especially as the only one who didn't make it back, people don't just see an isolated incident. They see a pattern they've been taught over generations to recognize. Now, to be clear, we do not yet know what happened on that boat. But tonight we are going to examine both the facts of the case and the deeper question: why does an incident like this so quickly become a national conversation about race? And more importantly, what does that say about trust, justice, and history in America today? Mississippi has one of the most deeply documented histories of racial violence and systemic racism in the United States. To understand why a modern, reality, what we're seeing today, like the death of Nolan Wells, can quickly take on racial significance, it helps to see the historical backdrop that shapes public perception. Slavery and the antebellum period, that's pre-1865. And for those of you who don't know, 1865 was the year that the Civil War actually ended. Mississippi was a core part of the cotton economy built on enslaved African labor. By the mid-19th century, Black people enslaved actually outnumbered whites in the state. Enslaved people were subjected to brutal control and any resistance was met with violence. This created a rigid racial hierarchy enforced by law and terror. Now, we also have the Reconstruction era that lasted from 1865 to 1877. After the Civil War, newly freed Black Mississippians briefly gained political power, voting, holding office, and building institutions. This period triggered a violent white backlash. Groups like the Ku Klux Klan used intimidation, lynching, and terror to suppress Black political participation. Reconstruction ended with white elites regaining control, often called redemption. And those of you who don't understand the whole matter of redemption, they believe that the whole matter of the Civil War was that it was unjust, was unfair, it should not have been fought for in the first place, and that something had done that, Black people had attacked whites, and therefore they should be redeemed. And that is why they had segregation after the Reconstruction. Now, Mississippi became synonymous with Jim Crow segregation, laws that enforced racial separation in every aspect of life. This era also saw widespread racial violence, especially lynching. Mississippi had one of the highest numbers of lynchings in the United States, and that is what we have to understand. Now, we're laying the facts here for you to understand. Very important that you understand the facts on the historical analysis for us to understand what is happening today. Now, we have Emmett Till, 1955, a 14-year-old Black boy from Chicago, was brutally murdered in Mississippi after being accused of offending a white woman. His killers were acquitted by an all-white jury. The case became a catalyst for the civil rights movement. Lynchings were often public and intended to terrorize Black communities, reinforcing white supremacy. Now, we have the Civil War era also that lasted from 1950s to 1960s. Mississippi was a central battleground in the civil rights movement and also one of the most violent. We have Medgar Evers, that's 1963, a civil rights leader assassinated in Jackson, Mississippi. Now, we also have the Freedom Summer murders in 1964. 3 civil rights workers, James Chaney, Black, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, white, were murdered by the Ku Klux Klan with local law enforcement involvement. Now, Black citizens faced beatings, arrests, economic retaliation, and murder for trying to vote or protest. Now, we have the post-civil rights era, that's 1970s to present. While legal segregation had ended, racial disparities persisted, and in policing, incarceration, economic opportunity, and education. Mississippi still struggles with high levels of poverty among Black communities, disparities in the criminal justice system, distrust between Black communities and law enforcement. There have also been modern cases that raise racial concerns. Suspicious deaths or treatment of Black individuals in police custody, and allegations of racially biased investigations. Incidents involving Confederate symbols and racial tensions, and this continues up to today. Now, why does this history matter? Because Mississippi's history includes centuries of unequal treatment, unsolved racial violence, and lack of accountability. And that is why it matters. Any case involving a Black victim, especially under unclear or suspicious circumstances, can quickly raise questions about whether the investigation will be fair, whether all individuals involved will be treated equally, whether race played a role directly or indirectly. Even when facts are still emerging, the historical memory of injustice shapes how communities interpret events. That doesn't automatically mean a current incident is racially motivated, but it does explain why people are alert, skeptical, and demanding transparency. So as this story continues to unfold, one thing is clear. This is about more than just one case, because when people hear that a young Black man was the only one who didn't make it back, they don't just ask what happened. They ask, have we seen this before? And that question, whether you agree with it or not, is rooted in history, in memory in a long record of cases where the truth was delayed, distorted, and denied. Now, we have to be honest. Not every tragedy is racial. Not every case is a conspiracy. Facts matters. Evidence matters. And jumping to conclusions can do real harm. But here's the other side of it. Ignoring history can do just as much harm, because trust is not built in a vacuum. It is built or broken over generations. So the real question may not just be what happened on that boat. The real question, do people believe they will ever get the full truth? And if the answer to that question is no, then we are not just dealing with a single tragedy. We are dealing with a deeper crisis of trust in the system itself. So I leave you with this. Is this case being viewed through the lens of race because of what happened, or because of everything that has happened before? And until this question is answered, or just with words, not just with words, I mean, but with transparency and accountability, cases like this will never just be cases. They will always become something bigger. Now, the Mississippi newspaper is reporting this afternoon the case of this young man, of course, Nolan Xavier Wells, who has gone missing and is found, and people are presuming that it's the body of Nolan Xavier Wells. Now, the story says here that hours after park ranger found the body on Horn Island while searching for missing college student Nolan Xavier Wells, the 18-year-old's mother confirmed his death on Monday afternoon. His father, our family, friends, and I are absolutely devastated, Christine Wansley wrote in a Facebook post. And I quote here, "My heart is broken for my sweet son who was always willing to cheer and uplift others. Nolan was a special soul. God took his time creating our son." And that really brought tears to my eyes when she said here, God took his time creating our son. The Jackson County Sheriff and coroner both confirmed that the body matches the description of Wells, who went missing Saturday, July 4, while visiting Horn Island with a group of friends. The cause of his death is still unknown. Now, that is something that is rather interesting, that you would have several men, a group of men, young men who went on a trip, and then afterwards you have all of them returning except the black man, right? The young black man. And we've seen stories like these before. But many people are making their commentaries, and we would like to examine some of these commentaries throughout the night. And I'm going to begin with this lady here. I think she has one of the most in-depth commentaries among the commentaries that I've seen on TikTok and on YouTube. So let's now look at what she's saying about what really took place and her analysis of that stuff. All right, so let me put it on the screen, and then we can discuss as we go along. Let me put this thing here on the screen and then turn the volume up so you can listen to what she is saying. All right, so I'll begin.
Make any of this sound like a conspiracy, and honestly, it's far more heinous that it's not, because whiteness doesn't actually have to sit down at a table and conspire on how to protect itself. It just reacts, automatic and impulsive. That programming and the unawareness of it are exactly why white spaces aren't safe for Black people. Let's get into it. So W.E.B. Du Bois talks about this in The Souls of White Folks, his 1920 essay that argues whiteness itself is propped up by violence, and that the discovery of personal whiteness functions like a religion that people are inducted into, and allegiance to that religion requires a moral corruption to sustain itself. So when Ta-Nehisi Coates uses the phrase people who believe themselves to be white, he's treating whiteness as a belief that requires violence to sustain itself. But to be clear, none of these are cognitive choices, and they don't actually need to be. The subconscious nature of whiteness protecting itself is exactly why people who believe themselves to be white, or at the very least are not in a daily struggle with whiteness in America, can never be trusted around Black bodies. And why? That's simple. They are socialized to sacrifice Black people, knowing that the consequences will be minimal. This entire conditioning is actually fed back to us through Hollywood. I'm talking tokenism and whiteness protecting itself wrapped up in fine cinematic storytelling. Let's start with his and hers. The sole Black girl in an elite friend group of white women who orchestrated her sexual assault filmed it, and then actively worked to cover it up. In Get Out, something we've all seen, where tokenism almost gets the main character killed until his saving grace, another Black person who isn't under the spell of white supremacy, comes and gets him out. And for a portrayal of how whiteness protects itself in law enforcement, we have 7 Seconds, where a cop kills a Black teenager, albeit accidentally. But his fellow officer's first response is not to help keep the Black teen alive. It's to protect one of their own. This is what whiteness does. The pattern isn't in one villain. It's dozens of people choosing silence because loyalty to the system outweighs the cost to someone outside of it. It's why I don't have white friends that I can't talk about race to. It's why white people who are in the mutual struggle against white supremacy need to be on the constant lookout for the dangers surrounding Black bodies. And it's why Black parents should be very wary of situations that tokenize our kids, not because we don't trust our kids, but because white kids aren't privy enough to the impulses of their own whiteness to keep our kids safe. My heart simply aches for Nolan Wells' family. And it's my belief that every single one of those kids knows exactly what happened to him because of the way.
Interesting. All right. So the question that we need to ask ourselves as we continue this discourse, are Black people safe around white people? That's the question that is being asked by many people. They're suggesting that if you're going out on a trip and it's only white folks, that it might not be the safest for you to be the only Black folk in that sort of community. That if you're going out, you should have at least a mixed group, or at least some people or somebody from your community. Are we really safe around white people? Now, good evening, and we want to hear some of your responses. Good evening, all. Can someone provide some background to Nolan Wells? Not familiar with the story. Now, yes, we said that Nolan Wells, okay, is a young teenage man who was almost 18, he's 18 and almost going 19, I understand, and he was a footballer in the United States. Now, he went on a July 4th. July 4th, the United States celebrated its independence, and normally people go on barbecue. But these fellows decided, along with some of his probably friends, they call them friends. And no, we're using the word lightly, friends, because not everybody is our friend, and not because they laugh with us and we go on trips with them and we eat with them. Anyway, he went to an island. They all, probably rented a boat and went to an island that was called Horn Island. Now, on that island, it seems that they were enjoying themselves, including taking swims. But after the trip, the day was finished, the three white young men returned home without Nolan Wells, and they claimed, they returned home with his phone, which was very strange, and they said that he didn't want to give the phone back to his mother, which would be the thing to do. So people are suspicious that the fact that they didn't want to return the phone to his mother, could there have been evidence, or what could be the reason for them denying that? The point of the matter is that these young men returned safely home while the Black man was killed. All right, it's alleged, because people were still not 100% sure, what has happened to him. But the coroners are suggesting that yes, they are, based on what they have seen from the body, they have no doubt that that is the body of Nolan Wells. So I hope that has given you a brief summary into who the guy is. Z is saying, I think that now Afro-descended peoples face a fighting fatigue, fighting against despicable injustice for half a millennium. It has worn us down. Thanks for the context, Andrew. Yes, and that is what has happened. And we know that that Mississippi is a very racist state in the Deep South. Right? People who have lived there. I had students at Howard University from there. They explained what happened there, and it's not the best of places to be if you are Black. Many people are still suggesting that Mississippi is in the 19th century. They're not even the 21st century in terms of racial progress, in terms of dealing with members of different races, particularly African American or Black people, as we call ourselves. Now we have here Thasni saying, I do not think that Black people are safe around these people, especially when you are the only Black amongst them. History shows that. Now, as you say, Thasi, and I do respect what you're saying, and most people are of that opinion. The majority of us are of that opinion. But I want to show you something that a little video here, just to nudge you and to let's get into a debate over this. Blacks are safer with white people. Let look at this video and see how would you debate this black guy who is suggesting that. All right, listen to him, and then we can actually discuss the content of his video. Right, just a clip. It's not long, so maybe about 2 minutes. So just listen to what he's saying. You don't have to agree, but we're here to debate. Right? Let me see if it's the thing here.
Hands of white people. So when you're black and you're allowing your children to go.
Rewind it. Let me so you can get everything it's saying. Why? What is this? Yeah. Okay. So let me go back here now. And
of your black children hanging out with other black kids. I mean, the black teens between the ages of 15 and 24 are the only group in America, in the US, that has homicide listed as their #1 cause of death. And those homicides are not at the hands of white people. So when you're black and you're allowing your children to go off with white people, they're much safer than they are with their black friends by the statistics, and by a very wide margin. I mean, if you look at the statistics, it's obvious you should be a lot more fearful of your black children hanging out with other black kids. I mean, the black teens between the ages of 15 and 24 are the only group in America.
Okay. I think we got his point, right? I think we've got his point, what he's saying. Now, how do we argue with him and the stats that he's presenting? How do we argue with the stats that he's presented? I want us to argue intelligently now, because we have to look at the topic much more in depth and objectively than what we're seeing here happening on YouTube and on TikTok, all right? Because we are the thinking channel, and we just don't want to have some very, shallow debates, because we have to look at everything. And we know that there's problem, of course, crime and violence is rampant within the black community in the United States. Black on black crime rate is, where blacks kill other blacks, high, as you would see in Jamaica also, and the Caribbean also. We're killing off ourselves. So we know that that is a truth, right? That is also a reality. So how do we argue with some of the things that we're seeing? So as he's saying, also, you cannot separate young people from their phone. This really is suspicious. Yes, I think that is suspicious. The fact that they didn't want the young man, the white young man, didn't want to return the phone to his mother. That was something that is quite suspicious, and the police should be delving into that problem. Now, Z saying, is it unknown if Nolan ever made complaints of experiencing prejudice with that group of friends? No, they are, based on what I understand, he seemed to have been comfortable around them. The problem is that people are suggesting that, some people, they will laugh with you. And we've heard stories before about so-called white friends, and they pretend as if you're their friends, and then they will sometimes end up killing you. Because sometimes white people also befriend black people because they lack self-esteem, one. Sometimes they don't have friends in their own community. And sometimes they use us as a way of doing what they want to do. For example, there was this African-American girl on TikTok, and she was saying she befriended a white person when she was 24 years old, right? And she said that, the person lived in her neighborhood, not far from her, walking distance. And she came over to her house. That's the white girl came over to the black girl's house, and she came with food. And she had, at the time, she said her daughter was probably 4 or 5 years old. And the daughter asked her for some of the food, and she said, no, it's my food and I'm not willing to share. But after she had eaten, after the white lady had eaten, she wanted to use the black girl's bathroom. So she was wondering, why did she leave her house to come over to her house to eat, right? And then to use her bathroom. Why couldn't she have done that in her home? But she was going through something, and she said she did not want to mess up her bathroom, her own bathroom that she was coming from. So whatever she was having, she would prefer to go to the black girl's house, right, to mess up her bathroom, because she didn't want to leave that sort of imprint on her bathroom where she was coming from, the White House where she was coming from. So it's to show you that sometimes they use us to do whatever they want to do, but in the name of friendship. And sometimes we must say that as black people, sometimes we think that it is of some status when we befriend these people, that we have arrived, right? Because one of the things you have to understand from this young man too, one of the discussions is, normally when Black people do very well in the US, right, most of the people that they come in contact with are white people, because white people do better in terms of economics, relatively speaking, than Black people, right? They go to so-called better schools. When we say better, all of these are quote unquote than Black people, right? So when Black people move into predominantly white neighborhoods, they tend to have more white friends than they would have Black friends. And in a state like Mississippi, where you have Black poverty at a very high rate, then it's more than likely that Black people who are successful in the state of Mississippi will befriend and will be friends of the white people, because they are the ones who, represent success. However, having said that, when you do that, then that is the environment, because that is the environment you reflect. Because if you're going to a school that is predominantly white, you're in a neighborhood that is predominantly white, then that can be a serious problem. Before I even answer more questions, I want you to look at this gentleman's picture. This man's analysis of what happens with Black people who tend to be successful and what happens to them. Let me see if I can get it here. Is it this one? It's not this one. It could be this one. Let me see if it's this that I had on the screen. All right, let me see if I can go here. Let me go here, and then perhaps this is the one that I was trying to look for. So let us listen to this video. I hope this is the one that I was trying to, the token Black person. Yeah, let me get this on the screen. Hopefully this is the one I want you guys to listen to, and then we'll discuss further. Let me turn up the volume.
See, during this time, when these people in some form want some type of revenge, they're going to take it out on your young Black boy, the token Black person. That is not racism that I'm talking about. That is reality. That is reality. Like a lot of people would like to say, why are you saying racism? That is not no fucking racism. That is common sense. When I was growing up, they call it street smarts. Where to go, where not to go, who to hang around, who not to hang around. Amongst Black people, there was just a story where a Black boy ended up dead, no one knew. There's another story where a white child tried to drown a Black child, but he didn't drown him, but the white child admitted that he was trying to do it. So while you're trying to be accepted and you thinking life is like cartoons as a child, you don't even know the danger you're putting yourself in. And you end up at the bottom of a pool, at a pool party. And nobody know how you ended up at the bottom of that pool. And you the only Black person. Or you end up at the bottom of the stairs dead at a slumber party. And nobody knows how you ended up dead. Am I saying something that people don't understand and never heard before? No, because these are real stories that actually happen. So you can be a Black person that lives in reality and know what time it is, or you can be a Black person like the comment I got that says you shouldn't focus on those things. You should focus on love and life and your family. You make the choice. The other video with the boy that got...
So, the whole matter of trust is what we're sensing coming out of these videos, right? And the fact that, white people, as some videos are suggesting, see Black bodies as a means of sacrifice. They think that to sacrifice a Black body is what they should do, right? Because it's a matter of being conditioned, right? Remember that, white people have been conditioned, as we also have been conditioned. Just in the same way that Black people are conditioned to feel inferior to whites, at least some, white people are conditioned to feel that they're superior and that they should use us as a sacrifice. So sometimes what they do, they are just being impulsive to their conditioning. And that is what some of people are arguing, that we have to be mindful that something might start out well, but when you end up, it might not end up good. And that's what it's saying. It's not the best thing to go when you're going on a trip, to go with only white people, right? Particularly in the United States. We're not talking about here in the Caribbean per se, but we're saying what is the reality and the culture in the United States. Greetings, Pedro Jamat. And then we have here Thazi saying, by statistics, all races are violent amongst themselves. And I will agree with that. I would agree with that. The only thing about it, though, is that if we're suggesting this, Thazi, and you're right, that we also have to say, why are we also violent amongst ourselves? So can we blame when other races are violent against us? It's almost like the N-word, right? There are people who say, Black people who use the N-word a lot, yet still they're saying that the N-word, even though we use the N-word to one another, we do not allow white people to use the N-word with us because somehow the N-word is special when we use it. I mean, that is ridiculous. So I think we should deal with ourselves too and wonder, why is it that we also kill a lot of our own? Now, Z saying, on the other side of the coin, some Black people crave to be in white circles because we have been conditioned to believe their lives are ideal, that we should aspire to that life. Yes, and remember now, in the context of the United States, it's a matter of class too. Right? So if you, for example, are living in Trinidad, let's say you're living in Trinidad where you have the predominantly Black and Indian people, right? And if a Black person, a dark-skinned person like myself, move into a predominantly Indian community in Trinidad because of their class and the schools that and I attend their schools, then you're going to be among those people. Right? So sometimes it's not because they see that the Black guy sees the white persons as superior, but because those white people represent people of his class, right? They go to school together, they go to the same games, they hang out together. That is the person that they are part of their environment. The white people become a part of their environment, and that is what it's about. Yeah, he does has a point. He has a point in terms of the Black on Black violence is something that we have to work on. And we can't just talk about whites on Black, but we also have to talk about the fact that we too are not so much trustworthy even among ourselves, right? But it's just in recent times, what is happening, Pedro, is in recent times, we have been seeing quite a number of incidents when we find that, you have two races, Blacks and whites, and they go out together, and you have these white people returning safe and sound, and that one Black person that was in the group sometimes ends up being unalived. So that is what people are talking about, and they're questioning and they are suspicious about. It differs if you have 4 Black men who go out and one comes back home, and 3 Black men, one probably is unalived and 3 return safely. That is different because you can say that they were all Blacks. But when you are seeing some, and it has been consistent for some times now, you're seeing a group of people going out, Blacks and whites, and we're seeing that whites return safely and Blacks are left behind or unalived, it means that something is definitely wrong. Now, look and see where the Black leaders go and live. Yes, because again, where they live in America, you have few very upper middle class communities, right? Most of these communities are going to be large white or mixed. And when you think about Mississippi, you know that that is going to be predominantly white. Most of the Black neighborhoods in Mississippi are of the marginalized Black people. So it might be communities where you don't want to send Black people to live. Your Black son would not live there. You don't want them to live there because of the gangs, right? Exposure to violence. But guess what? He's now exposed to violence coming from people probably from the middle class. And that is what is happening. Now we have here, some nuts are hard to crack. Right, correct. Now we hear this from Z. In the 19th century US Deep South, the featured entertainment at picnics was the lynching of Black people. Absolutely. And even during the slave trade, remember we talked about the fact that when the slaves were brought to the Caribbean and to the United States too, but most to the Caribbean, and sometimes for entertainment, the slave masters would have them what? Have the slaves, gather around, and they would call vicious dogs, right, to just devour them, and while they were having their meals, their picnics. So that was something that is typical of white people, and hence the whole conversation on white violence. Sometimes another thing we tend to do, associate violence with black people only, but we need to understand that white people are extremely violent. Now, what is happening in our world, and in the United States more specifically, is that the violence of black people is always brought to the fore. So they always, in the news, they'll tell you, and oftentimes the black person will receive the brunt of the law, right? However, the white man or the white woman most of the times gets away. Another context to what we're talking about tonight also, we are learning that the 3 of the white men who escaped and who went home safely, that their parent, their mother or father, is a judge. And some people are also alleging that another parent of that young men who returned, could be an FBI agent. So think about that. If one of the parents of the white men, the young men, is a judge, then you know that they're going to be taken up for, and some evidence might be hidden. So the fact is, a cover-up for white violence, while black violence tend to what? To be treated as something that needs to be curtailed and something that needs to be disciplined. And many people are talking about that. So even the stats that we hear about black on black violence, they tell us that because they expose that all the time. But what about the white on black violence that often get covered up? That is what people are asking, and we've got to be careful about. Now, let's go to another comment here. We have Thazi saying, but then are black people violent toward white people on a large scale? No. Why? Because they're afraid of the consequences, right? So we're seeing, as you're saying, Thazi, that while black people's violence against whites would be exposed and black people would be disciplined by the law, the vice versa is not true. On the contrary, white people get away when they practice violence toward black people. And this is now where it's very sticky, and people are very angry that they do not think that anything is going to come out of this. They don't think that the law is going to deal justly and fairly with what has just happened to Nolan Wells. They don't think it's going to change. But historically, white people are more violent toward black people. Yes, but they get away, as we're saying. The law protects them, particularly in the Deep South. Everywhere, but particularly in Mississippi and the Deep South, the state laws will protect a white man or a white woman from, practicing violence toward a black person. So this is the difference, and they're not highlighting that to us. Now, let's look at another news report. Let's look at another news report just to make sure we're getting the facts here. So I'm going to show you another news report just to get the facts and make sure we are on the right track. So let me and let me put it on the stage. And we are going to discuss now what is happening, the breaking news. Okay, so let me just turn it on.
Came home. Nolan Wells was 18 years old, last seen around 3 p.m. on Saturday. Wearing black shorts and sunglasses, he had come to the island by boat with a group of friends. Then, nothing. His mother reported him missing that same night. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department launched a search. The Coast Guard joined, then the Department of Marine Resources, then a volunteer group called the United Cajun Navy. Boats, planes, people on foot combing a barrier island most tourists never even reach. Monday morning, 8:45, a park ranger found a body in the water off the northwest end of the island. Officials have not confirmed the identity, but the coroner said something that tells you everything. There is no reason to believe it is not him. His mother posted online that she and his father have so many questions that some part of her is still waiting for him to laugh again. He was a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College. In 6 weeks, he would have turned 19. Tonight, his family is waiting on a DNA test to confirm what they already know.
Right? So this is to confirm what they already know. They know that he has died, right? There's no doubt about that. They know now that their son has died. And they also know, most Black people in the United States understand also that nothing is going to come of it, because this is how the United States justice system works, that they are going to cover up any suspicions against white people are covered up, while Black people's suspicions are dealt with fully, right, by the law. So let us now present if it were the vice versa. What if you had these three, one Black man and three white men? They went out, and what if one of the white boys or two of the white boys went missing? Do you think that they would have treated the Black boy as, wouldn't they think he was suspicious? Or what if you had three Black men, I should say, and one white man, one white man, and the white young man went missing? Then all of these other Black boys would have been called in by the police, right? Because they would have been suspicious. They would have said that, more than likely, these Black men killed that Black boy. But what it's suggesting to us, what this is telling us, is that Black lives do not matter to a great extent in the United States. They don't place the same value on Black lives as they would place on white lives. And that is what people have been saying all along, right? Some people are not arguing that you don't have Black and Black violence, because that you do. But what they're saying is that when that does happen, Black people have to go to jail, and the law deals with them, and the law doesn't play with them. But when it comes to white people, oftentimes they go off scot-free. This is the whole matter of what we're discussing tonight. What value does white people or Black people have in the United States? Now, this girl is presenting another story, and she's looking at the history of white violence on Black people, right? And these are very real stories, and we need to look at what she's saying. Let me put it on the screen, and then we can discuss that too.
Tamla has never received any justice. Nolan Xavier Wells, only 18 years old, went on a boat.
Okay, let me put it back. Let me rewind it, because we have to. Let me rewind this. Can you see it? Is it on the screen? Okay, it's on the screen. So let me now turn the volume up.
Tamla Horsford was at a birthday party, and she was the only person of color amongst her friends. She was a wife and a mother of 5, dead in her friend's front yard. Her friends told law enforcement that she fell off of the balcony, presumably drunk, and just died. The friends were never formally questioned, and medical examiners ruled it death by suicide. And to this day, Tamla has never received any justice. Nolan Xavier Wells, only 18 years old, went on a boat on the 4th of July with his friends. He was the only person of color within his friend group. Nolan was also the only person to not make it back to land. His friends claim that he just vanished, and they don't remember or know anything that happened. But park rangers found Nolan's body on the northern west tip of Horns Island, where they were boating. 2 people of color who have suspiciously died while being the only person of color within their friend group. I want to know what really happened on that boat. Tamla Horsford was at a...
So we're seeing, as she's saying, the same story, all right? The same story, and it's the same attitude toward Black lives, right? In which you have that person where you have 3 white women and a Black woman going out, and the only one that went missing was the Black woman. Did they get any justice? No. And she has itemized other cases in which that also happens, that, white Americans are always, getting away scot-free, while Black people are the ones to suffer racism, rabid racism, and are definitely not getting justice. Justice is always denied. Okay, Black people, whites always given to white people. Now, this is what we're saying, and it's something that I thought you would have been interested in, because it is something that is happening around the world, and we can see why our people, when you talk about reparations, we talk about reparations, and we're saying if they're not treating us well and they continue to behave as if it is still the days of slavery, we're not getting justice from the state nor the federal government, how is it that we think they're going to give us reparations? And there are Black people today, even in America, who think that the reparations movement is sincere, while at the same time, they are not treating our people well. So do you think that these same people are going to turn around and give us reparations, whether in the African American community or in the Black community in the Caribbean? That is not going to happen, because that is how they see us. They see us as people who really are not people. We're just there as a lamb to be sacrificed and to be slaughtered. And that's exactly what they did to that young man. All right, so let me hear more of what you have to say. I thought this would have been an interesting sort of discussion. Owing that we did last night, we looked at racism in the Caribbean, classism also last night, and we're seeing, and the same thing is being played out right in the United States. We're seeing racism is one in that incident, and also classism, the fact that most Black people have to go to predominantly white neighborhoods to feel safe, because that also, we have to talk about that, because they don't feel safe in the predominantly Black neighborhoods. So while we are being emotional sometimes, we also have to look at the real truth of it, that many of them, they have to move away, not because they don't want to be linked up with their Black people, but their Black people are really, really dangerous in terms of the neighborhoods in which we find ourselves. Drug addicted, and violence pervades that particular community. So they have to move away. Lots of Black middle class people move away so that they can, one, educate their children, because many of our Black schools are not properly run and managed, and many of them are not particularly functioning, right? So people, when they want to send their children to good schools, they have to migrate to white neighborhoods. But that is how the system is designed, right? That is how the system is designed. And then the system turns around and psychologically destroy our young people. That is what we need to understand. Now we're going to look. What do you think? What do you think about all that has happened? I think I've talked enough. What do you think? You're not so much telling me what you thought about. Why is Nolan Wells' death fueling a national debate or conversation on race? Do you think that it is a valid debate, or do you think that this is just another thing, nothing to worry about, another incident, as many people think? Let's move on to the next incident. What do you think? Why is Nolan Wells' death fueling a national conversation on race? I have something here. I didn't see it. Getting offended by the term is subjective, outrage engineered. Okay, I didn't see your comments. I'm sorry. Yes. Hey guys, I didn't get the alert, but good to see you. Between last night, I saw was they found a body they suspect to be him in the same location where they went. Yes, they're saying that they have no doubt that it is his body. That's what the news is saying. Last year and all throughout traversing the year, have been hearing about many weird deaths. Even one where a guy told his mom he had a bad feeling, went to work, and was found apparently hunted and dead. Right. These things are becoming much more frequently, and we have to really assess why are these things happen. But as we said, the legal system is against people of color, while it covers up for white violence. Now, these things, we ourselves are too naive, far too naive. We know historically that Western societies are constructed to covertly disenfranchise Black people. This is from banking to health to education. Yeah, but it's a good thing to say that, Z, but if you have a son or a daughter and they live in the United States, right? And you know that your Black communities are predominantly, having lots of guns and drugs, and they're not progressive, and education is not the thing for them. They don't have good schools. They're lacking good education. Where are you going to go? Are you going to go to another country, or you're going to migrate to a community that you think is safe, and that you think, a district that you think will give them good education? Remember now, any district you live in the United States, it also, you have to think about your schooling, right? And whether or not they'll be bused to school. Are the schools very good? Will they get them into competitive schools? And this is what they do. And we do it in the Caribbean too, right? We have to live in certain neighborhoods. Sometimes we have to move away from our family neighborhoods, right? Or childhood neighborhood, and move to a community that we think is safer. So sometimes it's not because they really want to live in predominantly white neighborhoods, is because that is the way that they're going to keep their children safe and to give them a good education. Trevor saying the news media never reports any of these deaths, especially in the sundown towns. I understand that they did. I have not seen them doing a lot of wide coverage of it, but I understand that they have been doing this. Z says, but some Blacks are so cognitively destitute that they cannot answer a question or defend a point they have raised. Their defects show through. Yes, I understand that. He was, somebody who was a bright man, a very, intelligent young man, a man who was going to, represent success. He was a footballer, but somebody who seemed to have been academically inclined also. Then we have Trevor saying, didn't just die, he was killed, murdered. And that is the thing. People are still suggesting that, yes, that could be the case, that he was actually murdered. The slave mentality will never leave us. And Bim Lady, welcome, and welcome to the live. It will never. Because again, as I'm saying, that the system is designed in a way in which, as we suggested last night, that the mulatto class of the Caribbean, the lighter skinned, the minorities, the racial minorities control the Caribbean. So if you really want to be successful, you have to really what? Bow to them. You have to live in their neighborhoods. You have to form connections with them. And that's exactly what Black people also do in the United States of America. D. McLeod is saying they would be suspicious of the Black guy. They would be suspicious of the Black guy, Which Black guy they would be suspicious of? Or the white guy. Z saying a blender savagely confuses things. The result is confusion. Yeah, I like that. And then Pedro is saying that metaphor meant that's you. And then we have Trevor saying Carmelo Anthony was found guilty last month and was turned into a monster on every headline. But if you hear the first report and see the video, the boy stabbed the other and ran scared and told the coach. Yes. And then we have Trevor saying, but it doesn't matter. You're saying again over and over again. It happens all the time, and the justice system keeps on denying Black people justice, right? Andrew, these videos really help. Too many of these stories are happening and go unsolved. Absolutely. And I wasn't seeing your responses. That's why I was asking questions. I was wondering if you weren't interested, but I did see the response coming now. So sorry about that. I'm coming to them, so please do not leave. And we have good to see you, Trevor. That's Z. Please, we'd like to welcome all of you here. And then we have Pedro. Everybody's hailing everybody. And then we have Thazi saying here, I think we also have to address why the Black neighborhoods are set the way they are. Yes, because they want Black people to fail. Right? Remember now that segregation was instituted immediately after the Reconstruction era. The Reconstruction era witnessed Black people moving up, but they were moving up too quickly. And they were educating themselves during the Reconstruction, which lasted from 1865 to 1877. When the white aristocracy in the United States saw that Black people were actually educating themselves and moving up the ladder, the economic ladder, so rapidly, they said, we have to do something about it. And they ended the Reconstruction and they instituted Jim Crow laws in the United States, particularly in the South. Okay. Now, what happened afterwards is that they said that the entire Civil War was unjustified and that white people were denied their rights. and that Black people wanted to come now and take over the United States. And that is why they started this segregation, and Black people could not use their bathrooms and all of the things. Now, we had the civil rights movement of the 50s and the 60s that sort of attacked that system, challenged the system of segregation in the United States. However, the United States was so soft that even though they removed the segregation barriers, they still had it. It was just superficially done. Right, but if you go to the United States, still the better schools for the most part are found in white neighborhoods. The better communities for the most part are still white communities. So the system is designed that way, and that is what we're saying, so that Black people can always look at themselves as failures and say that they have to depend on white neighborhoods, white schools, white businesses in order to survive. That's what we're saying. And he's saying, but Andrew, what about the situation where Black districts are starved of social services? The result is a manufactured ghetto. Yes, because that is also where that is denied them. Anywhere you have predominantly Black neighborhoods, Black schools, they are going to be denied of the resources that would be given to white districts and schools, because the system is designed that way. Please share the live, ladies and gentlemen, and like the live so that others can come on the live. The algorithm is not doing the work that it was made to do. So make sure that you share the live so that we can beat the algorithm system. Now, Trevor saying many want to believe these things don't exist, but many are salivating at the thought to kill or dominate a Black man and humble his woman. Exactly. And Black people in America, they know that nothing is going to come from the case, because that is how the system, the legal system, is also very political, right? And it is racially biased towards Black people. So that is a fact. Now, he does live videos too. I started listening to his videos. And then we have Pedro saying, how would you populate your community if your leaders are pushing abortions and same-sex marriage? Right. And not only that too, they separated Black women from Black men. Remember now that Black men also were the leaders of their homes. What they did now, they created this drug situation and they started imprison Black men at a rate far higher and greater than white men. So what happened, you find lots of our Black men behind prison cells where they cannot rear families, healthy families, and the Black community is going behind, moving behind. We are regressing than progressing, right? So we're living in a new era of segregation, but it is one that is masked. It is not one that they say, oh, this is segregation, but if you read and you look and you study, you realize that the United States is still a segregated country. Yes, Nolan Wells. Yeah, it's Nolan Wells. Yes, Nolan Wells. Yeah, Nolan Xavier Wells. That's his real name. Now, as Marcus Garvey suggested in his speech in Nova Scotia, Canada in 1939, none but ourselves can free our minds. Yes. One of the things, though, is that just like the slaves, it took the slaves hundreds of years, right, to free themselves from slavery. Why? Because the system had conditioned their minds that they had their masters, and that was the plight of Black people. Black people were supposed to work on plantations. That is what they got up every day, and the white people, the white man, conditioned them to behave that way. So that is what we're seeing happening even right now, that Black people in the Caribbean and in the United States feel that they are conditioned to live the way in which they live, and the white man is the one who controls the system, because that is how the system was designed. Now, just like the Black slaves on the plantation, we will have to rise up and say that the system is unfair and perhaps stop supporting white businesses, right? Which we do all the time, right? Their sports, their music industry, their clothing industry. We need to make things and to, have our own systems. We need to have our own systems, but we don't want to have our own systems, right? We only want to sit and think that we're going to complain about the white man, but he's not going to change. The white man is not going to change the system, right? So that is what we have to understand. Just like he didn't want to change the system of slavery. He did not want to change the system of slavery, and the slaves had to push his hand to change it, right? And that's what we have to do. We have to push their hands to change it. Stop buying from them. Stop buying from Amazon. Stop buying from all of these people who are supporting white violence. Now, then we have the suspects in the Nolan Wells case been taken in for questioning? Apparently, they haven't. And that's why people are questioning. Apparently, they have not been taken into questioning. It seems to me that they are just believe that, you know, they're innocent. Right, and I told you that one of the gentleman's mother is a judge in that state. So therefore, she is going to play a very important role. I understand that another son is his father is what do you call it, FBI agent. So you know that cover up is going to happen in this case. Now Zenzeli saying, I grew up with a og. Is it homie named Binky Fresh Flycat from our hood. Salute. Okay. All right. And then we have here that who runs the black neighborhoods? Most black persons, but they love to fight for other communities. Yes. And that is true. But remember now that even though they're run by black communities, just like we have our countries run by mostly black or people of color, but the fact is that the white man still is the one who controls at the top, who is the boss of that person who's running that state, you know, or the black communities. Oftentimes, at the end of the day, the white man is always at the top, right? Who make the decisions, who make the laws. Remember now that a country or a state speaks through its laws, and most of the times, black people do not make the laws. Just like in the Caribbean, we don't make the laws. Right? And that is why we're not seeing any improvement in our lives, even right here in the Caribbean, where we are predominantly people of color. So we also have to understand that, you know, sometimes we criticize what is happening in the United States, but when we look at what is happening in our nation states here, where we are in the majority, okay, and things are not improving, how can we, you know, criticize what is happening in North America? Now, Janice Marcelino is saying this is a biblical reason why they're behind young black boys. Yes. Yeah, we are behind because of the system is how it has been designed. And that is what is happening. They impoverished the black neighborhoods, then sent the guns, right, and the drugs. See Iran-Contra affair trial starring Oliver North. Absolutely. Right? That is what they do. In the same way that they took the black man out of the home and placed him in prison. Right? And right now there is a very, I should say now, there's a toxic relationship between black men and black women in America. And we have to talk about that because, you know, the relationship was also divided, where black women now are the ones getting the benefits and the social networks for their children. The black man doesn't have a say, and she weaponizes that against him a lot of times. Now, Trevor is saying a white supremacist's wet dream is now a reality, a package of idolatry, pride, debauchery, dependence, and demoralization, packaged and accepted as a gift. Many call it black culture. There was something I had here that I wanted to show. Let me see if I can go back to my thing and show it, because it's important for me to show you this one. This video that was made by a Nigerian, and I think he's addressing what just recently happened right there in Mississippi. So be a little bit, I thought I had it on the screen, but I didn't have it. He, I think, gave a very good analysis of how we are as black people when we have succeeded. You know, we tend to believe that when we have become successful in America, that we should engage more with white people than with our own. And he's suggesting that there is a problem with that, and it might come back to haunt us. I'm trying to get this thing on this screen, but it's not allowing me. I don't know why. I sent it to my email. Yeah, so it's coming now. So let me see if I can open it quickly and get back to you with this, wonderful thing here, if I can find it. Only if I can find it, because I think I might not be able to find it. Let me see if I can find it, ladies and gentlemen. Hold on a second. I might not be able to find it. I thought I had it on the screen. I might not be able to find it. So we'll look at that another time. Okay, so we have here, Andrew, big question. Since shows that extended PTSD does permanent psychiatric damage, Western Black have 500 years of PTSD. So do we have a collective psychiatric problem, in your opinion? We do. We're still suffering from trauma, and many books have been written about that. We're still suffering from trauma. And it's more so in the Black community in the United States, because it's every day the police system brutalizes Black men particularly, and make them know that they will never get in charge and that the system is against them. The George Floyd and the daily police brutality in the United States is sort of conditioning them, constantly saying to them that you are never going to be men here in this country, right? And that is why some African Americans are leaving the United States, because they realize that when they go to country like, Barbados and Jamaica and other predominantly Black countries, that they feel as if that they are actually men and individuals. But when they're in the United States constantly, they feel that they're constantly watched, and that a trap is being laid for them so that they can actually imprison them. It's not a very healthy society to live in where Black people are concerned. Okay, now we have Pedro Diamante saying that was the purpose of feminism, to destroy the nuclear family structure. Yes, and it was white people who came up with that, and we joined in that movement, and that movement was not for Black people. But as we say, sometimes we tend to follow white people, and we think that what they suggest, we also should do what they want us to do. Another thing too is the whole matter of that we were a religious people too. Let's talk about that too. That we were a religious people, and then white people say they started to become non-religious too, and then we follow them. So everything they do in their schools, we follow it. All of the policies that come from in the United States as educational policies, all of these policies, we are also developing them here in the Caribbean. So everything that the white man does, we do. If he's religious, we're going to be religious. If he's non-religious, we're going to be non-religious. If he's an atheist, we're going to be atheist. If he's, if he wants to be, to go with animals, we're going to go with animals, right? We tend to think that white people should set the pattern. Right, the white liberals. We are also liberal in our understanding of the world, and not in a good sense. Right? We have become woke too, like them. Everything they do, we copy it, and we think that is the way to go, and that is destroying us, and it's destroying them too, But we are more destroyed because we have been at the bottom of the ladder ever since. So we can't follow them. So because while they might be destroyed at the moment, because they're destroying themselves too, but we are going to be more destroyed because we have been at the bottom of the economic ladder. Now, Trevor saying it's clear as day from the civil rights movement using MLK, he got them to integrate, then elevate their women, then feminism and sexual revolution. That was not his intention though. Right? Let us also be clear that it was not the intention of Martin Luther King when he saw the level of, Black liberation and feminism. He would have opposed those. He was quite conservative. The fact is that what he was trying to do was to let America know that until they begin to unify and come together as one, America is not going to achieve, right? America is not going to achieve its fullest potential. And that is true. When you read the history, some of America's best times were after the 50s, 60s, and moving on, right? Because when they started now to at least superficially to have some Black people and people in general to be a part, to benefit from the American dream. So it was not his intention, Martin Luther, for, you know, the Black community to be involved in gay rights and sexual revolution, and, you know, but integration, he thought, was necessary because, you know, he went to countries like Jamaica. Martin Luther King went to countries like Jamaica and perhaps other parts of the Caribbean, where he saw all people living together. And he thought that they, even though you had your white Jamaican and your Chinese Jamaican and your Black Jamaican, and they called themselves Jamaican. They didn't say that they were Afro-Jamaican or they were Indian Jamaican. They just said that they were Jamaican, and they speak the same way, and they, you know, and they interacted quite well. Of course, there was not everything was not, you know, equal, and everything was not Irie, but at the same time, he said it was better than in America, where people were seen by their race, right? Can you imagine you go up in a country and they're calling you African Americans, and every day they're African Americans, you're African Americans. You are an American, just like anybody there, you know, and that is what they do. So they use these terms so that they can let Americans know, Black Americans specifically, that they will never be fully American. And he's saying, no, that is not true, that Black Americans are equally Americans as any other racial or ethnic group. And I don't think anything was wrong with that. But as you know, what happens is that people can take your good intentions and they can move with it in the wrong way. Now we have, in my opinion, the saying, feminism has some relevance. The problem is the extreme form of feminism. The extreme is always the problem. Yes, women's rights is very important, but feminism as a movement has not had any, what should I say now? Its genesis, the seeds that were planted for feminism was planted by the wrong women, right? And many of them were anti-men, right? Where they do not believe that men should be, you know, should not have the leadership role that he should have in the home and all of that stuff, right? And that also has created a lot of chaos in the home, in the workplace, even in the church now, right? That is creating a lot of debates, and people are suggesting that, you know, oh, can women be preachers and all of that. But that is another conversation we need to have in terms of the role of feminism, but women should have rights. And it did have, as you're saying, Z, sometimes bad things can be used for good, and out of bad cometh good. And the feminism movement, as far as suggesting that women are equal, was good. And to fight for rights of women, right, that they should get the same pay like a man gets if they're doing the same job and they have the same qualification. Nothing is wrong with these things. The problem is that the role, feminism wants the role of men and the role of women to be blurred, right? And what is happening is sad, because that's where we're now moving, that women, that there's no difference between a man and a woman and all of that stuff, because our roles have been conflated and we've got to get back to basics. Now, then we have Pedro saying forced integration is not integration. You don't see ethnic groups segregate. Well, he was not saying it should be forced. That's why he was going through the democratic process. Remember now that Martin Luther was nonviolence. So he was using what? Debates. He was using debates and the democratic process to achieve that integration. Okay, remember now that he did not die. He died shortly after the United States got some of those rights were implemented. So we can't now say that he lived to see much of what he yearned for. But we do know that before he died, he said that he was leaving a burning house. He knew that something was wrong, and he knew that the liberals were misusing and misdiagnosing his suggestions and his vision of what he saw for the United States of America. So it's one thing to have good ideas and good policies. It's another thing for people to misdiagnose them and to misuse them so that it would end up not accomplishing the purpose for which it was designed. All right, so that's what we have to understand. Now, Trevor saying, he who controls the images controls the mind. Many will fight to get the capital of Sodom while it burns. The MK culture, is currently on trail, but people will deny. drunk on the wine of Babylon. Yes, and that is what is happening. People just don't want to see what is happening. They're bring mind control, and the United States uses the media, uses the education system, and movements, right? And so like the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, look at the Black Lives Matter movement. From the fact that they're saying the whole movement of saying Black lives are essential, nothing is wrong with that, and Black lives should be respected. But when you look at the genesis of the system too, the Black Lives Matter, their main emphasis is on the LGBTQ, the LGBTQ, right? That's what am I saying? What am I saying here? Right. That is their main emphasis on that movement, but they're not really about Black people. That's why we do the same thing with climate change, right? The Black Lives Matter is not really about Black lives per se. It's about the sexual revolution in the United States. And people don't understand that. You just go and read it and they'll tell you, right? That is their main emphasis is on the sexual revolution in the United States. So we can see where Black people are in a very precarious position, because we find ourselves that we are closely aligned with the liberal stance, right? With the liberal people, and they're not looking out for us. In fact, they're trying to kill. They are trying to kill whatever gains and achievements that we have achieved over the years, right? That's what they're doing. Andrew, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. As you're saying, Trevor, you're correct. What you said is true, but MLK was used for their purpose and to train people how to respond to injustice. And they will do that. They will do that. Absolutely. White people will use you if they can. And that is what we have to always be understanding of. Even when they seem nice, we have to be careful. We have to look at them, look and to see beyond their, niceties and the wonderful words that they're using with you. Because they like to stoke our egos too and make us believe that they care when you look closely at them, they don't care a hoot, right? They're just about their agenda. And that is what we have to understand. Malcolm exposed well, remember now, and we want to be very clear on this, let's not divide our rulers. Malcolm played his role, and his role was necessary, right? Martin Luther King played his role, and his role was necessary. Very important we understand that. Okay? And we need not to say one was better than the other, or the other strategy was better than the other. Let us say that both of their strategies were important, and they achieved greatly, and they educated their people in their own way, right? We won't always have the same strategies. We won't always think in the same manner, because we're not robots, right? Never think we're robots. You will have a different way of doing your podcast than I do, but if we are trying to uplift our people, those will be the case. Right? That is what we should look at, that the upliftment of the people should be the underlying objective and not the strategy or the personality of that person. I think that both persons were commendable, Malcolm X and MLK. Now, Thassi is saying he said that he was afraid he had led his people into a burning house. Yes, and he did. Right? And he did. And he was also skeptical of the Democratic Party. He was always skeptical of the Democratic Party, but he used it because that was the party then that was open to giving Black people in the United States their civil liberties, their civil rights. Now, he's saying, Andrew, if MLK were to return to life this instant and live for a year, what do you think his views about the condition of Black people might be? First, he would think that they're very now irreligious, that there's so much materialistic. I think that would really get him off his feet, because you must remember that Dr. Luther King was a religious man. He was a pastor. Another thing that he would realize that that they are not about uplifting the Black community anymore. Their goal is to enrich themselves, right? So when he looks at the current crop of Black leaders, he would not be impressed, okay, by them. I think he would also be unimpressed by the poor nature of the education system and where Black people are now in terms of the education ladder. Because these people, even though they were brought up in a segregated America, Black people at the time were very educated, right? Under poor circumstances, they were very literate. So he would be very, very, very much, surprised at the high levels of illiteracy in the Black community in the United States. He would be alarmed, if you will, at that. So yeah, so in terms of that, I think that he would also, when looking at the first so-called first Black president of the United States, Barack Obama, he would have been disappointed. He would have been sorely disappointed with Barack's achievement for, as far as African Americans are concerned in the U.S. and perhaps in the global South, if you will. Now, Trevor is saying integration and the mass embrace of MLK's methods were only the beginning of the issues by means of the agendas, which were then pushed violently via a Trojan horse of empowerment. So you think that they were on the beginning of the issues by means of it. So you think it was a Trojan horse? Yes. From the white perspective, yes. From the white supremacist perspective, yes. From his perspective, no. But from the white supremacist perspective, yes. And I think that, the fact that Martin Luther King was a student of Marcus Garvey, I think that he might have been led away from, I think he must have been misled. He was so passionate about Black people and their, achieving something in the United States that he might have gotten ahead of himself. Because Marcus Garvey did say that white people would never accept Black people. He said it. He said, you guys, you can sit and you can do all you want to do, all the dancing. And that's why he and Du Bois did not agree. Because Du Bois, just like Martin Luther King Jr., thought that somehow, eventually white people would start to accept Black people as soon as they, educated themselves and they sort of were transitioned into white philosophy and white, mode of thinking and behavior. And the only way you're going to do that, educating them, having them pass through similar institutions and doing what white people do. Right? And that is what has happened. I think, when you look at the Black community in the United States, and people find this offensive, but it is the truth, Black people in the United States are more white than they are Black. And, people tend to say, wow, no, because you think, the music, all of that. But you must understand that they've lived there for hundreds of years in America, and they have interacted with their white people for all these years. And that is why sometimes, the whole relationship between white America and Black America is so strange that you have to be careful. Because if you are, as a Caribbean person or African person, if you have a beef with a white person, okay, the Black person is going to defend the white person as a Caribbean Black person. And I have seen this multiple times. Okay, so when you look at Black people, and that's why they're having problems with Africans, Black Americans are having problems with Africans, because, all they say that they're Black and they talk about Africa, they are more whites than Blacks because they've lived among white people all these years, and these are the people that they, they're brothers and sisters, whether they like it or not, because they've lived in the same house, even though they don't like each other, but they've lived in the same house for years. Right? And that is the way, it's strange, a strange sort of interaction, but it is the fact. So maybe Marcus Garvey, coming from Jamaica and non-American, he could see that, right? But for Marcus Garvey and some others, probably they couldn't see that. They just saw themselves as, yes, we are part of the society and we have to work with these people who don't like us, but we are relatives and we have to live in the same house and get along. Right? But Marcus Garvey said, based on what he saw there, that they would never get along. And I think that Marcus Garvey's words are true, right? And those prophetic words would have come to pass with what we're seeing happening right now. Okay? Now, Thazi is saying you cannot integrate into a system where there is no justice. Right. Absolutely. But the thing about it, as we're saying, that what we have to understand is that the United States is an experiment. And when the founding fathers created that country, it was not created for everybody, not even for the white man. Remember now that it was under Andrew Jackson that white people got their freedoms, their democracy, that they became a part of the elected class. They could vote. They got their, what do you call that now? What we call these things, the right to vote, their suffrage, right? Their suffrage rights. So it's an experiment. So what they're saying, what Martin Luther King would be looking at, he would be saying, eventually, as black people became much more adaptable and they assimilate into white culture, into white American culture, then you'd have some form of justice. You'd get, more black lawyers, probably more black judges, so that the system could be more equitable, but it is not, right? It is not equitable at all. Now, is he saying which of the two demons is the better, the liberal progressives or the fascist conservatives? Neither. Okay, neither is, because they're the same people, because the oligarchs control both the fascist conservatives and the liberal progressives. The fact is, however, even though neither is good or better, sometimes we have to work with them if you want something to be accomplished. For example, if we want the end of slavery, right? The end of slavery, the Republican Party was the progressive party then, right? So the black people had to work with them to ensure that slavery was abolished. And that is how you have the 14th, 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, right? So the fact of the matter is that sometimes you have to work with the devil, but you should not get in bed. Well, because politics is the devil. Let's be clear on that now, all right? Politics is a demon, and we're living in a world that is not heaven, right? We're not living in paradise. So sometimes you have to work with the devil to accomplish what you need, but you can't get in bed with the devil. Now, how can you work with the devil and not get in bed with him? That's another question we need to ask, and to answer rather. He would check himself in a mental institution. Malcolm X achieved leading the sheep into the burning bush. Malcolm X achieved leading the sheep into the burning bush. What do you mean by that, Pedro? You think that Malcolm X destroyed black people? When he left Muhammad, or you're saying that? Okay, so when we have here Trevor saying MLK's statements on leading his people into a burning house are always overlooked to keep people in their dream, pun intended. I think he was disappointed. I think he saw that, these liberals, the ones who claimed that they were for equality, that they were not. When he saw the Vietnam War, when he saw other things, he saw many other things he saw America doing, he realized that they were just using a lot of rhetoric and they were not very, very sincere. Their actions were not aligning with actually what they say they wanted to achieve. So I think that from that perspective, Malcolm X, but Martin Luther King Jr. saw that the United States was two-faced and he could not trust them. So he could not trust the liberals of the Democratic Party. He realized that from then. Now, why is it that today we still trust them? That's another question. I don't know. I think we just see things. Everybody votes for the same people according to family history, and people just continued as a tradition. Now, the best thing that happened for him, but they too were compromised and couldn't have an independent, strong mind. Okay, and then we have other people responding here. You all forget, is it Kaneka Jenkins? Kaneka went out with all her black friends and end up in a hotel freezer, in Chicago, and nobody knew what happened there. Were kids, no matter the race, and they were intoxicated. Wow, that is news to me. I've never heard that one. Thank you for sharing that with us. Then we have Pedro Jamati saying state, corporation, and unions working together for a consensus, and you saw that during COVID under liberal leaders. Of course, they're all the same. They're both the same. But again, as I'm suggesting, that we are living in a world, and sometimes we have to work with them because that is how we get things done. Now, can I just add, though, in relation to Obama, is that no other president suffered the level of resistance from Congress as he did. That fact that must be considered in judging his performance for blacks. Now, that is what he uses, right? But remember now that when President Obama won the first time, that he won, I think, both houses, right? So he could have gotten things done. He just didn't want to do that, and he used that as an excuse. But Obama could have gotten lots of things done if he wanted to, but that was not his agenda. His agenda was to just soften Black Americans and to lead us into this very false and phony post-racial society where people would think that racism no longer matters because at least you have a Black president. And that is what the agenda was. And many Black people went to sleep and are still sleeping because they were. So Trump actually came in to wake them up and to let them know that he moved from this Black agenda to this white sort of rabid agenda, and the pendulum swung between, you know, the white supremacists and those who thought that Blacks were coming in to take over the United States. When Obama came into power, many people, including white people, were thinking that, you know, these white supremacists were thinking that Black people were coming to take over the United States. Do you know that? And then that is why they now brought Trump in to give the impression that he's now coming back to take back the power that was taken from white people and given to Black people. That was the sort of ideology that, you know, the oligarchs were working with to divide the people of the United States so that they would never see what the oligarchs and the ruling class are doing. Andrew, be careful not to let American Blacks hear you say that. They won't defend you. If ICE comes knocking, they will call you a Trump supporter. You're right, but it is true. And you see, Trevor, many of them are actually online saying that Trump should deport Haitians and Trump should deport lots of us as Black people. Lots of Black Americans are supporting Trump policy in immigration. Why? Because they think that other Black people are coming there and taking away their opportunities. Right? So whether we like it or not, they support it. Many of them are not saying, but there are lots of them online, go on TikTok, on YouTube, where they're asking, why are Haitians here? And why don't they go back to their country and, you know, and build their country? Why does America have to help these Haitians? Black Americans, a lot of them are saying it. Okay? So which means, therefore, that there are lots more Blacks are supporting Trump at a rate higher than we normally think, than the news media is telling us. Because at the end of the day, only when something affects their community directly, they will stand up to the white man and they will protest. But if it affects another community, another Black community, very few of them will stand up and defend that foreign Black community. We have to understand that. Okay, it's something that we have to understand. It's almost like you're living in a home, right? And you are part of the family. So even though you are part of the family and, you know, you might be exploited and abused in your own family, but don't talk against my family member. Don't talk against my family. I don't want any outsider to speak against my family. The same thing happens in the Black community in the United States, that Black Americans really are, they are closer aligned with whites than they think, because they're Americans. Culturally, they're Americans, right? They like to give you the illusion of this black and white nonsense, but at the end of the day, beneath the surface, they are Americans, and we've got to understand that. And don't you ever get into a warfare between, you know, a white and a Black is there and think you are going to be defended even though you are Black. It is not going to happen, no matter how Pan-Africanist they are. Now we have Thazi Macabus is saying, Martin Luther realized the deception in the end. Now can we negotiate with a people who have broken every single treaty that is known to mankind? Now, we are in the same plight, you know, in the Caribbean. How do we negotiate with the IMF? And we still negotiate with them. because we don't control the system. So unless we have our own systems of our own economic system, we still have to negotiate with them. And that is what Marcus Garvey was trying to do, and they didn't listen to him. If they have a boat, we must have a boat. If they have a white Harvard, we should have a black Harvard. These are the systems that Marcus Garvey was trying to build, and the black people thought that he was going too far. And now we are suffering. We are suffering for having not formulated and built those institutions. But yes, if we don't have the economic institutions, education and the likes, then we have to still negotiate with them. Or how will we survive? How will we survive if we don't? Now, check Larry Sinclair interview with Tucker Carlson, okay? I will do that. And then we have Z saying, Shanquella Robinson was a similar death, but the news is also purposely not pushing some deaths once it's black on black for political points, which said blacks further desensitization. I mean, for the most part, they do push those stories. Black on black is the white on black that they often do not talk about. But we need to also address black on black crimes, because that is something that is also not very good, and it is embarrassing. It is embarrassing. But when we look also at the communities, the black communities, we can see the system is what creates that sort of black on black crime. Because if you do not offer them resources, just like you have in Jamaica, right? So in Jamaica, you have Jamaicans killing Jamaicans. But who created that sort of environment? The CIA in the 1970s created that condition for Jamaicans to continue killing themselves. And then they created the drug trade and the illegal guns going into the Caribbean, killing all of us. And we're going to talk about that tomorrow. So we need to understand that it's a system that has been designed. And until we get rid of the system, then we cannot, treat the symptoms, right? Now, Trevor is saying majority of Black Americans and so-called foundational Black Americans are leading the charge against their Haitian brother and sister. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right? So even though many of them are against Trump, they're against him for attacking them. When he attacks their Black community directly, then they will scream and they'll cry, right? But when he's attacking other people, other Black people, they're not going to say anything. Very few of them will say. Some of them do, don't get me wrong, but the majority won't, because they're saying, why are we talking up against when we are the ones who have given them the opportunities to come here? Now, Z saying, Andrew, can you imagine that the same narrative Black South Africans are using to drive Nigerians and other Africans out of South Africa? Absolutely. 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 Because, I was saying to you last night, culture is an amazing thing. If I come to Trinidad tomorrow, right, and I am Jamaican, and there is a warfare between Black Trinidadians and Indo-Trinidadians, as much as I want to talk and might want to get some sort of, align myself with the Black Trinidadians, at the end of the day, he or she is Trinidadian and eventually might side with his Indian people because they're Trinidadians. Something about code, national code, cultural code that we must understand. And this is what many people don't understand. I have seen it on numerous occasions where Black Americans will betray you to their own white masters. Okay? I just want you to know that. It happens and happens more frequently than you think it does. Now, we have the Trevor saying the institutions are being built. Ask Umar Johnson, and he recognized what Motley did a long time ago. Pimp your people, about reparations, etc. Play that part. It makes you rich. Yes, but I wouldn't trust Umar Johnson too if, to talk about white people or whatever, because, again, at the end of the day, he might just behind the scenes side with them. Pedro Jamart is saying the other cultures ain't using drugs too and got guns. It's a curse from what happened during slavery. Other cultures do. Remember, we talk about the Latinos, and other cultures do use drugs, and they are also in, you know, the Latino culture in the United States is not much better than the Black community there, right? So other cultures do. It's just that we are always at the end of the bottom of the pile. They treat us the worst because they want us to remain at the bottom of the pile. Okay, but the Latinos are not much better. Now, he's saying, was Jimmy Cliff a pawn of the CIA to integrate crime, violence, and drugs into Jamaican culture? I have heard that on several occasions. Is this true? Not to my awareness. So I would have to read up. Could you send me something if you have read anything about it? Let me know, because I've not heard about that. In fact, Jimmy Cliff to me was the opposite of, I would think, our dancehall singers and the ones that came after the 80s. Yes, maybe I would agree with that, but not Jimmy Cliff. I think his music was always clean and revolutionary, and stuff like that. I never seen Jimmy Cliff, in that light, but maybe, because again, human beings cannot always be fully trusted. So I will never say never say never. But from my perspective, I think Jimmy Cliff was, well, he was a womanizer. From that perspective, he wasn't that great. But the fact of the matter is that I don't think he was somebody, working with the CIA. But maybe he was, because again, Jimmy Cliff worked in Hollywood, so he premiered a movie, or so these people can't be trusted. So who am I to say? Perhaps. But from my perspective, from what I've read of him, I don't know. I don't think so. But if you have something, share it with me. I'd like to read it, or video to watch it. Pedro is saying straight. Trevor is saying to Pedro straight. Obama wasn't about blacks. He was all about these colors. Absolutely. He even went to Africa personally to push the LGBT agenda to revolutionize blacks from the pinnacles of those against it. And he went to Jamaica too, and and questions were asked there about the IMF, and he was just deflecting away from the IMF, what do you call it now, the history of the IMF in the region and the austere measures that they implement in the region. He was not prepared to address the person's direct questions. And that was something I watched, and that Obama is a player, right? That is what he does. He plays, and he plays the race card, and people just like it because the first black president, so they worshipped him. But I noticed that that's what he is. A player. Now we have Pedro is saying here, finished what? Umar always begging for more money, right? He's good at begging, right? And sometimes you really wonder, he's good, he's brilliant, all right? Dr. Umar Johnson is brilliant. He has a brilliant mind, and nobody can refute that, can debate that. What sometimes I do wonder, sometimes you wonder if the same white man puts him up to create this sort of illusion, and he's this great, African Pan-Africanist and whatever. Sort of weird, right? Because how does he do what he does and they don't take him in? Because I understand that they've given money. People have given money to him to build the school, and the school hasn't been built yet. How has he not been put in prison for that? I don't know. Then we have Trevor. Not only Africa, the Caribbean, Jamaica too, and CARICOM went ahead, but Mr. Stewart dragged his feet. And then we have here covertly introducing drugs and guns in countries throughout the Americas as a subjugating tactic aligned to the Monroe Doctrine. And they've been doing that for years. This is not anything new. This has been an ongoing matter for many, many years, right? That drugs is being used to go through the Caribbean, which we'll be talking about tomorrow, and then to implement draconian laws so that they will be able to control all aspects of the Caribbean development, or lack of development, that is. Now, he is a psychologist. Who is a psychologist? Obama? Are you saying Obama's a psychologist? Let me see if I could find the video that I wanted you to watch. I don't know where I put it. Oh, it's here. Right, it's here. And I think this Nigerian gentleman gave a very good perspective of what we need to do as a Black community, okay? I'm coming to it. Let me take this off. and come to this now, and let me just share my screen with you guys and listen to this guy, because I think he's making sense here, because we have to look at different perspectives so we can make sure we're understanding what is really going on in this world of ours. Let me stop the thing. I might have to rewind it when it comes on the screen, because yeah, I'm on the stage. And then I'm going to now turn the volume up. I might have to rewind it, ladies and gentlemen. Let me see if I can rewind it. It's almost there.
I worked in corporate America for a couple of years, and I was successful, if that makes any sense. I was earning good money. So automatically I was surrounded by people who looked a certain way. And I also noticed that in the same Washington state, the Black people that I also maybe dated or I was friends with were also surrounded by white folks. White folks. Let it sink in. So the system is designed in such a way that when you climb, you think you don't have to surround yourself with people that look like you. I had friends who looked like me. I eventually invited my Ethiopian friend to join me. I helped his wife learn Scrum, and then she joined. Every Nigerian who could wanted to learn Scrum. I taught them Scrum to join, corporate America as well. But unfortunately, when I worked in labor and industries, Washington State Department of Labor and Industries, there's just one Nigerian. He had been a project manager for over 30 years. And when those racist bastards started dealing with me, he couldn't really do anything. He was on another team. He started telling me his own stories and what even the directors had done to him for those years. But unfortunately, what happens is you also find yourself isolating yourself from people who look like you. Now, I didn't do that, don't get me wrong. But a lot of Black people do that. So I understand that this whole successful thing, when you're successful in the United States as a Black person or an African immigrant or somebody from the island, Black still, you suddenly start exonerating yourself, exempting yourself from people who look like you. You are undoing yourself. You want your kids to go to a good school, and then you put them in an all-white school. For what reason, if I may ask? For better curriculum? Hold on, because I've heard that a lot. For better curriculum, how? If you think sending your kids to an all-white school for better curriculum is helping them, no. They are seeing only white leaders. It's also messing with their minds. They're seeing that professors and leaders are white. They're seeing, they're going through a lot of gaslighting, and they're internalized. They don't even know. Sometimes they will get bullied through subtle microaggressions to join things that they don't want to join, because I know because in corporate America, I stood up for myself as an adult. Oh, we're having an all party. I said, no, this is not very inclusive. Your games is not inclusive. It's not diverse. You do not ask us what we think games are. You assume that because it's a corporate environment, everything has to be white. Now, I spoke up, and of course, I lost my job every time I did. But what I'm saying is, putting your kids in an all-white school because you want them to have a better education, something you have to, something making you think that way. Because your kids being in an all-white school doesn't mean they're getting a better education, because they're not. Put your kids in historically Black grade schools if you're Black. Put your schools in all Black schools for a reason. You think you've made it out. I get it. You think you've made it out. Finally, I made it. No, you've not. You're still Black in the United States. Making your kids have a different life, different from the realities of the US, is just going to make you mourn your child. You're going to bury your child. And I don't mean any harm. But the more you keep exposing your children to, or your Black kids to, whiteness, like it's the ultimate, you're going to bury them. Let's learn from patterns, if not anything. Learn from patterns. You're not special. The other day was this Black girl, South African by the way, crying that Choi Shik did not have autograph, because Koreans are trained from childhood to think that Black people are impoverished. They don't identify with Black people. It's a training. It's a training. The same way Jen Elliott said, every white person trained in the United States is racist unless the person has put in the work as a miracle. Because a system, a school that you attend, and every inventor is white. And the Black people are slaves. And everything about Black people is shit. And that's what you want your child to learn. You're not doing your child a favor by sending your child to an all-white school as a black parent. You're not. You're not better than the rest of us. Let it sink in, God damn it. Do we have to yell? Do we have to yell for you guys to listen? Every time it's one black person alone with white people, things happening to them. The other day was another black kid who his friends were mocking. It was a white woman who saw him struggling on the lake and went to save him because his white friends wanted to let him die. You should understand, they don't see you as human. The way they are trained, when you're trained from childhood and even in classroom to think that you're better, your species is better, you've done everything better. Of course, you're going to begin to think that black people are property. Why do you think the white woman walks up to a black dad with his black daughter and she stretches her hand to want to touch her hair and he says, no, you can touch mine. And she said, no, I want to touch it. Why do you think she has that audacity? It's from training, childhood training. God damn it, don't send your kids to an all-white school. The other one went to...
Okay, so good. So, I think we got the gist of what this fellow here is saying to us, right? That we cannot at this moment begin to think that when we send our children to all white schools or everything, if we're working for an all white corporation, that is a symbol of success. And even if we happen to work or we have to go to school to these all white neighborhoods, we still must not, move away from our community. Because if we do that, we are not going to be safe. And he's right. We have to build communities, and communities does not mean that we are going to move away from them because we think that we're now living a more successful life economically or educationally. And that is what many of us do. So the mother here of this young man, I get the impression that they're living in a middle class, home in Mississippi. And I'm sure perhaps she probably thinks that her son was receiving a good education and he's a part of the football team, right? And would be going places. But look at what has happened to his life, right? Look at what has happened to his life because of a system that is designed to see black bodies destroyed. Now we have Z saying, to those in the chat, what is the harshest treatment in which the LGBTQIA be subjected, just out of curiosity? Could you answer that question? To those what is the harshest treatment to which the LGBTQIA, I didn't know the word QIA, be subjected, just out of curiosity? You can answer those questions. I don't know. Pedro said, yes, and foolish Jamaican singers rebuke their songs and stance on LGBT lifestyles for their visas, right? Like the Buju Bantons and, many of them had to, but not only them, everybody had to subject themselves to that. All right. It's not only Jamaican singers, but all artists and singers, including also professors. And, remember now that I understand that that being the LGBTQ, being a gay or homosexual, that was considered to be mental health, right? Up in the psychology journals, and they had to change that because, of course, the community came down on these journals. So it was not only musicians, but everybody who did not fall in line could be severely damaged. Their careers could be severely damaged. The rebels' angry flame was put out with just one drop. Despicable. Yeah. So we have that and clarify the question. Somebody's asking to clarify the question, Z. So he's asking here, yeah, I meant about using the Americas as a traffic route and the Monroe Doctrine. Now, we understand that we are playing with a system. We are playing a chess game. This is the geopolitical chess game, and we are in a system that is designed to fail us. And that is why sometimes I don't understand some of these podcasts that you're flocking, some of you are flocking to also, where they're just talking about what is happening in your country. You can't understand politics if you don't understand geopolitics. You can't understand politics if you don't understand what is coming from the empire, what is coming from the United States of America. You've got to understand that very well for you to be able to filter through that lens what is happening in Barbados, what is happening in Jamaica, what is happening in Guyana. But too often we spend so much time on the gossips and what is happening in our local parliaments and not understanding that all of these talks that you're listening to are not going to uplift you in terms of understanding the history of what is happening in the United States and the West, these Western metropolitan states. But how much will I preach to let the people know in the Caribbean that we have to wake up? Now, these things, I don't support the promotion of murder of LGBT. I oppose that vehemently. You may oppose the lifestyle, but not to the extent of promoting murder. Yes, right? We do not endorse any murder of anybody here, because just like we don't endorse the murder of a Black person, we should not endorse the murder of somebody who, has a different religion or sexual orientation or whatever they have, right? That is not, it is not our right to take life. And if we think we can take life of somebody because of their sexual orientation, then the same thing, we can't say anything when somebody take a life of somebody who they think might be Black or Chinese or whatever. Because it's the same thing, right? Once that person is not affecting you, not coming to you and proposing and, trying to convince you into their mode of thinking, then they should be free to live how they want to live. Just like, racism. White people want to be white. Well, that's your belief. You think I'm inferior, you can think I'm inferior. Once you do not impose your philosophy on me, then stay with your white racism. Because as far as I'm concerned, if you think you are superior, I am way more superior than you are, right? Because that is stupidity. And I like the fact that some of our people are suggesting that racism is in fact a religion, right? And it's a pagan religion. It's not a Christian religion, it's a pagan religion in which they think, because, when you study the history of paganism, you see that they have to always sacrifice some lamb, right, on the altar. And what they do, it seems that they sacrifice us. We are the lambs that are sacrificed on their altar. Now, then we have Bim Lady saying LGBT are respected better than Black people. They want everything catered to them, because the politicians are the ones doing that, right? That's the agenda that the LGBT community and their agenda has now, replaced, as it were, Black rights and all of that. Now, Pedro is saying, what Andrew said just now, we mentioned it last week. Other podcasts always reacting to news every single day, planning to take back the country by smartly observing the hurricane inches away. Absolutely. Right? We are just reacting. What we have are podcasts that are just reacting to news, what they see, Miss Miyamoto doing or Andrew Holness doing, and they're not seeing that, if we are to understand the root causes of what, bedevil us, then we cannot talk, and then we cannot, change. There can't be any serious change. What is happening with this guy here, that's Nolan Wells, it's because of the system, the institutionalized system of racism. That is an institution, and no amount of, protesting tomorrow and shouting and carrying on is not going to help. It's not going to change the system. What is going to change the system is when we Black people begin to say, we're not buying from you anymore, right? We're not supporting any white business at all. But the fact of the matter is that we're so much addicted to their products and what they sell that if we were to do that tomorrow, they know we would not be serious, right? Because what do we produce? We produce nothing. We produce nothing. And that is what Marcus Garvey was saying. We should have become self-reliant. And we did not do that. As a result of that, we are so much, tied to them economically that we can't say anything. When they tell us to run, we have to run. When they tell us to jump, we have to jump. When they do things that are unseemly and unjustifiable and illegal, as we saw what happened with this young man, there's nothing much we can do but cry, right? And my heart went out to the mother who was crying, but she knows that there's nothing that she can do but cry. Lament the fact that our young man and her young son And she said it so very nicely that God took the time. He was a sweet young man, and God took the time, the Creator took the time to have carved him out when he created him. What a wonderful sentiment from a mother. Now we have Trevor saying, correction, we produce workers. You're right. That's exactly what we do. We produce workers and slaves. That's exactly. That is what we're producing. And we call it, Trevor, by the way, we call it the service economy, right? So the guys who work in the hotel industry, we call this now, we're running a service economy. And we feel that is what is giving us the growth. I hate when they tell us that the tourism is the number one foreign exchange earner, and it is the number one industry in the country, and all of that. It's just slavery, because we know that the hotels are not owned by local people, right? And the monies go out. Then we have Z saying, furthermore, they have gone light years ahead with technology. We must depend on their technology to live, right? They look at YouTube. If we say we're not going to support black, white people tomorrow, then we won't have a... I like what you said, Z, because even me, what we would use for YouTube, right? We would not have a program tomorrow. I would have to cancel the program for tomorrow because there's no YouTube. They control YouTube, right? And the TikToks and, well, the Chinese are the ones who do that. But the fact of the matter is that because we don't produce anything, we would have to cancel everything. We would not be able to survive. So we miss the days when because if Marcus Garvey were still alive, he was the one who was bold enough. Where did he get his boldness from? I don't know. He was a man that was rare, because he's saying, if he were alive, he would be saying, okay, YouTube, we must have a black YouTube. Oh, okay, this thing, you must have a black whatever, right? But we never did that, and to our damnation. Z is saying, but your point, Andrew, is extremely important. Yes. If we did not, the point is important, but as you're saying, Z, that if we were to do that, we practically would not be surviving, because clothes or food, whatever, they have us, right? They have us in their palms. And how do we get ourselves extricated? But seriously, as Z is saying, the fact that we know this now, shouldn't we now try to, because we are bright now, we have some bright people in the Caribbean. Shouldn't we now come together with our monies and try to say, let's make up our own YouTube, our own similar version of, not YouTube, we won't call it YouTube, but our own technology? Because we can do it. We can do it if we want to, because they're not brighter than we are. They might have more resources. But if we try to start from ground level, I think we can build ourselves up and condition Caribbean people to use our platforms and not to use the platforms of these colonial masters, right? And just move away from them. But if we continue to rely on economically on white people, which we are, then there's nothing we can do to their injustices. Absolutely nothing. Okay, then we have the CIA. Z saying the CIA totally destroyed Garvey's plan. Yeah, it was then the FBI. It was during his time. The CIA was not yet in operation, but it was the FBI who destroyed his operation. Yes, the FBI followed him around through Edgar Hoover and destroyed him, right, and deported him back to Jamaica. And they didn't even leave him there, right? They reported back to the colonial masters in England when he went back to Jamaica, and they ensured that they destroyed his life in Jamaica too, and he had to flee to England, where he died, and he died a very sad sort of death, right? Because he realized that black people were not, one of the things we have to understand too, and we should talk about Marcus Garvey one of these days, is that black people are, when it comes to development, is our worst enemies. Some of our worst enemies are black people, right? And the black Americans, for the most part, W.E. Du Bois and a number of them, were the ones who reported to white America to destroy Marcus Garvey. Do you know that? Yeah. They were the ones who did it. Okay? So when we talk about the long history of blacks against blacks, and we can talk about blacks and everybody's Pan-Africanist and whatever, Marcus Garvey was a Pan-Africanist too. And the greatest, perhaps, of his time. And the greatest, he was the one who organized the greatest black movement, mass movement of black people in the United States, and yet still own black people. And one of the things that professor, I think, what's his name again from this university? He's a Jamaican professor at the University of California. Well, he's now retired. He said that the Marcus Garvey's movement in the United States was not comprised mostly of Black Americans. It was comprised mainly of Caribbean people, right? So when we think that they were the ones who were supporting his movement, many Black Americans did not support his movement. They like it now because they realize that, you know, their hopes have been dashed in the United States. So they will say that they're a Marcus Garvey, you know, follower, just like how many African Americans don't particularly like Africans, but they claim Africa because they know that the United States doesn't like them and they have to claim a homeland. Right? So these are some of the ironies here. And I'm not saying these things because I'm anti-African Americans. I'm not. Some of my best friends and good people, they're good people, right? But I'm saying here, I'm talking about the system, how the system has been designed. Just like in Jamaica, Marcus Garvey came from Jamaica and Jamaicans were against him, right? Because the system sort of, you know, indoctrinated Jamaicans to hate the likes of Marcus Garvey, who was trying to uplift them. And the same thing happened in the United States of America. So when we talk about this black, we must understand the history, that we are not just going to do just one sort, we're not a monolith and everybody is together and we're all black and have the same agenda, because that is not true. Some of the people who are going to betray you are your own black people. Now, when Trump introduced the crazy tariffs on China, it was hysterical when China said they're in debt because you invest in war and showed our culture, technology, and machines producing world products. Yeah, that is what US is doing, because the United States loves war. But remember, war is building up the elites and the oligarchs while it's destroying the social and economic fabric of the working classes and the middle classes in the United States. So for one segment of the populace, war functions, and it is that agenda. So when people are saying the United States is losing, they must understand that losing on whose part? Who is losing? The United States citizens or the United States oligarchs? And people are still not being able to understand that that is how you have to look at it, because the oligarchs are winning. They're selling machines, they're selling, gas prices are going up, right? So they are winning the war in terms of the interests that their, class is aligned with, okay? So we have to be able to analyze these things well, right? When we say the United States, who are we talking about? The elites or the ordinary people? Who is winning? Because surely the elites are winning. Now we have Z saying it was a Barbadian who developed the first internet search. Wow, good. So if that can be done by a Barbadian, then we know that we have the talent in the Caribbean to build the entire system. Correct. And thank you for letting me know that, Z. Then we have Trevor is saying, gotta love the 3-letter agencies. Those guys sure do know how to commit to a cause. Yeah, because that is what they do. Their thing is to undermine anything that is going to liberate people. And that is exactly what they did to Marcus Garvey. And do you notice how that Marcus Garvey is just, people just talk about him to talk about it, to feel good about, what he said and all of that. But they really have not really analyzed how much Black people have helped to destroy him. We don't hear that being spoken about often, right? It's always how white people destroyed him, right? But we have not really spoken so much about how Black people destroyed him, and how if he were to come back alive today, that the same Black people or people would still destroy him. Because we love white people, we love white institutions, we love what whiteness represents, whether we like it or not. We do. We love it. because we have been conditioned to do so. Now, Z saying his name was Alan Emtedge, studying at McGill in 1990. Who was that we're talking about? However, never reached Africa. Yeah, Marcus Garvey never reached Africa, but he sent people there. Yes, Alan Emtedge, and was only acknowledged. Oh, it was the guy who did the search engine. That's what you're talking about. He invented it as a database at college so people could find their books and information on Google, Yahoo, etc. ran with it. Thank you so much for telling me. First I'm hearing his name, and that he is actually a Barbadian. So for those of you who don't know, a Barbadian was the person who discovered Google search. All right, so if we can do that, if a Barbadian can do that, then we can do much in the Caribbean. Z saying, and by the way, do you know that a lot of Caribbean people and other peoples have developed these things, and the white people take over things and say it's theirs, right? Just like the slaves, had inventions, and white people put the copyright on their names and think that they're the ones who made that system up. Now, imagine if CARICOM had made the initial investment in Emtedge design. They could not pay him still. That's the whole thing, that many times, if either CARICOM had co-opted him to do so, many of our people would rather get millions of dollars from what the companies in the global north have to offer than say what the CARICOM would have to offer. They couldn't pay him what he thinks he would get, unless he was so, what you call it, a patriot of CARICOM of the Caribbean, that he would say, I am going to stick to my patriotism and build up my people. Many of us would opt for more money than being patriotic. Let's be honest about it, right? Z saying no, he studied in classrooms in Southern Caribbean. Okay, that's in Trinidad. Marcus Garvey, yes, bingo, yes. So this is where we are. This is where we are in terms of this discussion on race. Your participation was excellent. We hope that this video will be able to move along. If the algorithm will only send the videos along and stop, shadow banning the videos, then I think that the videos could be able to move along so people can learn from, because the participation is second to none, Mr. Algorithm, and you don't send the videos along. Don't know why. So we have as long as people suffer and keep, let me get back here, keep feeling pain, even if it's not food, but to buy an iPhone to heal them, that way of thinking will never get majority to put aside self because of competition and validation. Absolutely. And again, as we're saying, we love white institutions. We love what white people do. We just love it. We just love going to Harvard. We just love working on Wall Street. When we say you're working on Wall Street, or you went to Oxford, it's like you're in heaven, right? Because Oxford, you went to Harvard, yes, it's, and everybody's going to, bow. They're going to bow to you because you went to Harvard, right? Or you went to Oxford, or you're working on Wall Street. Okay, so that's what happens to us, and then we find ourselves in problem. Z saying Marcus Garvey is studied in the classrooms in Southern Caribbean. Wonderful discussion, Andrew. Yes, he is actually discussed, but we're saying that a lot of what is happening, we know he's not discussed a lot in Jamaica, but we have not said particularly, including the United States, how Black people, helped maliciously to destroy Marcus Garvey and his vision for Black people, right? Much of what we talk about him is just, yes, self-reliance, but we're not doing anything about self-reliance. We like to talk about him when we want to feel good about ourselves, just like African Americans and Black people like to talk about Africa when we want to feel good about ourselves. When we want to, particular African Americans who feel disconnected from the United States, feel like they're not citizens of the United States, so they like to associate with Africa. But, many of them don't care about Africa. Many of us in the Caribbean don't care too. So I don't know. We have a long way to go. And this discussion is a discussion that needed to have been had. Trevor is saying, the CARICOM would never invest in their own. In each individual country, if you dare bring forth a great idea, they try to rob you of it and sell it to someone before it begins keeping you. Absolutely. And that is why I'm not the person of the Caribbean Court of Justice. I support it because those who would like to use it, and it provides jobs, don't get me wrong, and we should have our own court of justice. So for that reason, or for those reasons, I support it. But in terms of the principle of our people and the fact that we are not non-biased, we are very biased people, and we're also emotional, then I don't think that we would be dispensing justice at the level that I think it should be dispensed at all times. Maybe sometimes we do, but not at all times, or most times. Thank you, Andrew. Looking forward to the next slide. Yeah, so thank you so much, everyone. And we hope that we have gathered something. I've learned a lot from you guys tonight, and we hope that we can join tomorrow's live at the same time, I think, at 7 o'clock. Please look at the notification. You'll see the notification for tomorrow. Yeah, and Trevor is saying here, look at government and entrepreneurship courses. The only thing you can do is nails, lashes, and make soap. I like that. I like that. And make soap. Anything else that requires resources, they tell you to kick rocks. Absolutely. While they will give it to the Chinese, and they give it to the Indians, right? They'll give it to the Indians and the Chinese and other people, right, to make, right? While our people, they will definitely say, no, you can't do that. The Caribbean, we don't have the resources. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. See you tomorrow. Have a great night. Enjoy the discussion. Bye.